Welcome to Stenbridge Vineyard. I'm here with Max Gifford, who's the owner of the vineyard on my right, and also with us today is Bridget Ennals, who's the Sustainability Guardians Coordinator for New Zealand wine growers. We're in the vineyard here today to have a look at some of the posts that are now being potentially produced for vineyards out of naturally durable eucalypts, and also to hear from Bridget about some of the issues that they do have with the current use of chrome copper arsenic treated pine posts.
Hi, so I'm Bridget Ennals from New Zealand Wine Growers. I'm the Sustainability Guardians Coordinator. So New Zealand Wine Growers is the industry body for grape growers and winemakers, and they run a program called Sustainable Wine Growing, which is based on 6 focus areas: waste, water, soil, climate change, people and pest and disease. Growers and wineries are audited against the guidelines and accredited accordingly. So in New Zealand, on average, there are about 40,000 hectares of grapes being grown. Historically, CCA treated timber has been the preferred trellising used. So CCA treated timber is timber that's been treated with chromium, copper and arsenic to prolong and preserve the life of the post. One of the issues we do have with these posts is that they can break during mechanical harvesting. Some growers have reported between 2 and 5% of posts that are broken on any given year. So that equates to approximately between 11 and 29 posts that are broken per hectare on a vineyard that has a row spacing of 2.4 metre width and 1.8 plant spacing. So as a minimum, if we were to say that 80% of vineyards in New Zealand are using CCA treated timber as a trellising system, that would be a minimum of 370,000 posts that are being broken on an annual basis. In terms of disposal of these posts, it's actually quite problematic. Because they have been treated, wineries are unable to burn them. In fact, it creates toxic fumes and toxic ash. The posts cannot be mulched or composted. And the best way of disposing of the posts is either sending them to landfill, which doesn't really sit well with a lot of people because we're trying to minimise the waste that we send to landfill. Or the other option we do have is to burn them in a pyrolytic burner, and where the posts are burnt at extremely high temperatures and they're able to scrub out any toxins. But there is only one accredited facility here in New Zealand, and that's based in the North Island, and so is not really economically viable at this point from the southern regions. So basically, growers stockpile posts in the hope that they can find a second life for them. So they sometimes get reused in landscaping projects, and there is a company out based here in Marlborough that point posts and on sell to farmers. Growers are looking for long-term sustainability, environmentally friendly products, looking for a post that's durable, that has low emissions to produce, that is cost effective and is easy to dispose of end of life. Growers are really keen to try hardwood posts. At the moment we have supply issues in terms of the only available supply is really coming from Australia, and growers are concerned about the cost of that and also the emissions associated with transportation to here. So if we can have a hardwood post that is grown here in New Zealand, I'm sure it's going to tick a lot of boxes.
I'm Max Gifford, the owner of this vineyard here, Stenbridge Vineyards. It's an 80-hectare block, and we first started off in the late 1970s, so it's about 42 years of grape growing. In our vineyard we have probably about 400 broken posts each year, and it's really quite a major problem we don't really want. I mean, we start off straight after harvest and we go through and touch basically every post to find out whether it's broken. That one obviously is. So then we have to go through and remove the nails and remove the post, put in a new one and re-nail it. And so 400 times, that's a big job. And walking 400 up and down each row to find them's a major job. So we're really keen on finding an alternative. There is a bit of a swing in Marlborough to steel posts, which does eliminate the broken post problem, but they aren't perfect. A steel post is quite a small diameter and they don't have the width to withstand strong winds and a heavy crop. What happens, the whole post starts to lean like that. And so the only cure for that is to go along and put a block of wood or something in front of it to hold it back, and that's another major job we don't really want. We've tried plastic posts. There's some behind you there which are a disaster for us. The later ones I think are probably much better. So Paul got us interested in putting in the eucalypt post that came from Australia about 11 years ago. And so far we've had virtually no breakages at all. So they definitely have a place in the vineyard. I think probably you'd still want to have the odd half round, maybe every third post needs to be a half round to get that width to withstand the winds, unless we get our eucalypts quite, larger scale. The things that probably matter to a grower is, you want that surface area. The price would have to be right because everything's in thousands. They need to be easy to put in. And another thing is, grape growers tend to be quite fussy about things looking right, so they need to look okay. We don't want a great hairy old thing with bits of post sticking out the side. And it looks like the eucalypts we're getting now are fine, they're very good.
I'm Clement Saltana from the School of Forestry, and I'm a wood scientist. I'm involved with the NZ Dryland Forests Initiative since about 2009, and in the recent time we also do some work on processing these posts. And the first posts which were also installed here in this vineyard are these square posts, and they came from a really old eucalyptus bosustuana tree and globoidea tree, and they were cut with a sawmill. And we can't really produce these square posts from small diameter trees, and in our case we don't have really big trees available at the moment, so we need to manufacture them from smaller diameter trees. And that's what we've done in the last little while. We used conventionally available machinery to see if we can use these high density, very strong, hard eucalyptus logs and produce them into posts. And here we have 3 posts which we manufactured with a conventional post peeler. And they all came from one eucalyptus bosustuana trees, and there were actually 5 posts coming out of a tree of that size. We used 2 different machines for doing that, and they are really small scale machines which you can either move to your stand, so have it like a mobile saw and bring it to the resource and process it, and also a little bit a larger one where you can have higher production rates as well. Both of these machines, they were well able to make posts with good surface. They really look the same as you would produce them from radiata pine or any other softwood for which those machines have been designed. And there was no problem with the hardness and the density of these eucalypts. What was a challenge was this really thick bark which these trees have, and only when they were debarked logs that worked. If the bark was still on the logs, the machines had real trouble. And that's not so much of a problem, because when you fell trees, mechanically you can easily remove or debark the logs, or there are other machines which can take the bark off. Really good about producing posts from small diameter trees is that it's a high value product which is made from a really low quality tree. Small diameter trees are typically of low value, often used for firewood or just fiber pulp. But if we can make posts out of them, that's a high value product. And additionally, we can produce round posts at reasonably high yields. There's hardly any wastage which we have from that. And that's in contrast if we make square posts from big trees by sawmilling, the conversion rates are quite low. What's really good about manufacturing posts as well is that we have machinery which is able to work on really small scales. So having a mobile unit going into the stand, almost like a hobby business, but it can go to really large scale. And we have already an existing post industry in New Zealand based on radiata pine, but these machines can also deal with our eucalypts. So it is a really easy entry industry, because we can just slowly phase in the durable eucalypts when they come available into an existing industry, or we can establish small scale new durable post producers. That's very different to a pulp industry, for example. If you want to build a new pulp mill, it's $1 billion investment, and it's 1 million cubic meters of wood going into these mills, and you need an appropriate sized forest to it. So that's not an easy feat to do. Now we are in a vineyard where one of the Bosiswana posts had been installed 15 years ago, and we took the opportunities 4 years ago in 2017 to assess 50 Bosiswana and 50 Globoidea posts for decay. And how we do it, we just remove some of the topsoil, and then we look at decay here. And why do we look just in the topsoil? It's because that's the most dangerous zone for the wood. It has moisture and it has oxygen, and both moisture and oxygen are required for the fungi to survive. Further down there will be no decay because of lack of oxygen, and further up the wood will be too dry. So remove a little bit of topsoil, and if there's a fungi growing in the wood, it will become soft. So we make just a poke test, and we put a knife or something to it, and we see the wood is still rock solid. So even 4 years on, this post shows no sign of decay. It has now lasted 15 years. I can show you some other sample here, and breakage of the post is a problem. For radiata pine posts it's 2 to 5% of the post breaking, but for the eucalyptus posts there were hardly any broken. Some posts broke right at the start, so that is a post which we dug up in 2017 after 11 years, and it was broken at the top, as you can see, but it broke here because of a knot which was in the post, and it's an issue of quality control. So if we have more posts available, we need to do a proper grading regime and exclude posts, and then we don't see that breakage. In any ways, this piece of wood, you can see after 11 years in the soil, it's still solid, nothing has decayed, and it's easy to dispose. You can just use it as firewood, or you can plane it down and use it for something else if you like.
So having been out here in the vineyard, it's been great to see the hardwoods being used. There's been hardly any deterioration in the wood, which is really good. And I think it's really the way forward to have hardwoods grown in New Zealand.
A very exciting alternative to the normal way of producing posts is actually combining it with rotary peeling veneers for plywood or LVL. So we have an existing LVL and plywood industry in New Zealand, which is based on radiata pine, and they use big logs, and they turn the logs around, put a big knife to it, and then they peel veneers from from the logs, like those, and then they are glued together into products which are called plywood or LVL, and I have a sample here. So during this, this process, we are not only making veneers, but there's also a byproduct, and that's the peeler core. It's just where the center of the log was, and it was held in the lathe. And these peeler cores, if they are from radiata pine, they are basically only used as firewood or as fiber for the MDF industry. But if it's a durable eucalypt, that's a really nice round post which we get as a byproduct. And this byproduct has the same value, or maybe even more valuable than the veneer itself, which is peeled from these logs. And the rotary peeling has another advantage as well. It's a very high yield operation, so we can convert a lot of the wood which is in the log into product, veneer, and then even the posts. And making these veneers, and this is a Eucalyptus posistuana veneer, which we have already glued up into Eucalyptus posistuana LVLs, that the mechanical properties, the structural properties of this timber is very high, very strong. So it's very stiff, very strong wood, which makes exceptionally stiff products. And the timber engineers wanting to build bigger and bigger timber buildings, they really ask for this higher stiffness engineered wood products. And they can be manufactured from our trees. They cannot be manufactured from radiata pine, because the radiata pine wood is not that stiff. And again, because we have an existing radiata pine, LVL and plywood industry, we can slowly phase in our eucalypts. We have shown that they can be peeled within these mills with the standard equipment, and we can slowly phase them in and either making exceptionally stiff products, or we can mix them up with the radiata pine and just lift the properties of radiata pine products by incorporating a little bit more stiff veneers from our eucalypts. And the byproduct would be the posts. One thing about these eucalyptus posts, and that's again a Eucalyptus posistuana peeler core post, is that the wood is very hard. And we were wondering, is it actually possible to use the standard fencing equipment of staple guns to put in the staples which are used for fencing, or also in the vineyards maybe? Because if they have higher hardness, it's more difficult to get staples in. So we use the standard staple gun for fencing and use the standard radiata pine staples, and we got the staples all in. That worked reasonably well. We got the larger ones and the smaller ones, they went in very well. Or let's say they went in behind the barb, and it's very important that they go in behind the barb, because that is what holds them in. But they didn't penetrate as much as in the radiata pine posts. There are two types of staples. There are softwood staples and hardwood staples, and the softwood staples are a little bit longer, 50 millimeters, and hardwood staples are only 40 millimeters, and they are not available in New Zealand, but they are plenty available in Australia. It's an off-the-shelf product, and if we use those, it's perfectly feasible to use standard fencing equipment to put the staples into the durable eucalypts.
Today I also wanted to talk to you about some of the other applications for durable hardwoods. We are focused today on the posts and the opportunity that we have to grow roundwood, particularly to be used in vineyards. But some of the other applications that are possible, that are, if we grow forests for longer term rotations, similar to radiata pine, so as to produce large saw logs. Some of the timbers that I'm going to show you now are the same species that we're planning to use in the vineyard. And when you saw them and machine them, you'll see some beautiful colour and grain, and the properties that make them very good for posts are similar for applications that are both outdoor applications as well as indoor applications. So the first example of another product that our timbers can be used for are for cross arms. this big piece, or fairly big piece of timber here, this is an Australian imported crossarm. I'm not sure how long it's been up on the top of a power pole, but a lot of people don't appreciate that these are sitting up on and carrying the electrical wires that supply power to all of our whole country, and that we've had to import these for many years, and we've never been able to produce them here in New Zealand. One of our goals is for our forests, future forests, to supply New Zealand with power. A second example for potential use of our timber is internal flooring. So for example, this is Eucalyptus persistuana. This is timber from only a 15-year-old tree. It's been planed up and oiled to bring out the grain, and then I'll bring up alongside it, this is Eucalyptus globoidea. Very similar, it's 15-year-old timber, equally beautiful but a different colour. So we also have some pieces here showing a species made up, for example, that could be used in a tabletop or a bench top. This is Eucalyptus quadrangulata. Here's a small panel of Eucalyptus tricarpa. This is ironbark and has a deeper reddy brown colour, very attractive to the Asian markets. And finally, this larger panel, this is Eucalyptus persistuana. It's beautiful grain. Some would say similar to teak, which is renowned throughout the world as a species for all sorts of applications. So I hope you appreciate that there is a lot of other potential uses for the hardwoods that we can grow in New Zealand.